Welcome to my channel, Edible Thoughts Makes. My name is Stephanie, and I am coming to you from a freezing February day in the year 2025. I live in Minnesota with my husband and our 2 young children, and on this channel I have a lot of knitting projects to share with you today. I know it has only been 1 week since we last chatted, but last time I had a few projects that were pretty much near the end, and so I finished them up in the last week, and I just really wanted to share with you what they ended up coming to life as. And I didn't want to wait until several more weeks to come back and tell you about them, because then I'm sure the pile will get bigger and bigger. If you are new here, the way I usually organize my videos is we have an intro and welcome section, and then I go into what I am wearing, which may coincide with finished projects, and then works in progress, and then eats and reads, where I talk about maybe things I've been cooking, baking, a new cookbook to share, a new recipe to share, and maybe books that I have recently finished reading or am currently reading or plan on reading. And then sometimes there's a food for thought section at the end where I share something that has been weighing on my heart or is in my mind, and it's more general life stuff, sometimes related to making, sometimes not. And then sometimes there is a question for you that relates to that for you to join in on the conversation. I do include closed captionings on all of my videos here. You can also adjust the speed for your preference to go faster or slower. Here on YouTube, there's like a little button, I think, on the bottom lower right-hand corner or something like that. Somewhere in there. But that's also where the closed captioning button is as well. I do include show notes for the things that I talk about here. They will be in the description box below this video. I do use Ravelry for my project pages that are knit and crocheted. Sewn items are not on Ravelry, and so those will be listed as project pages in the description box below this video. Something that I don't always remember to say is that I put the video that I talk about that project also in that project page. So I will have it linked as a work in progress or as a finished project. And so if you wish to find out more information about that specific project shown in video format, then you can look there as well. So one of the items I have to talk about today is a newly released pattern that I had tested just this past month. And then 3 of the items you saw last time as almost finished works in progress. And then I have, I think, 3 new cast-ons to share with you. The other ones that I showed as works in progress from last time that aren't finished today, I'm still working on, but they just have their places around, and I just don't have a deadline for them, and they will get finished when they get finished. But those ones I plan on finishing hopefully in the next few weeks as well. They're getting close. They're getting close, but that does not mean I didn't cast on more things. So did I mention it was cold? Yeah, it's really cold outside. The last couple of days, it was like almost minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit, including the wind chill. So I think it's specifically like the coldest I got was minus 29 Fahrenheit, which is the equivalent of minus 34 degrees Celsius. Now that is really, really cold. I feel like it's been so cold that when that moisture gets onto my eyelashes, it instantly freezes. So when I blink, I can actually feel my eyelashes. And yeah, it's just that cold. But it's starting to warm up. I'm guessing all our beautiful snow will be melted in a few days, which is really sad. It's usually still snowy in March. We'll have the occasional warm day, but our planting season generally doesn't start until the middle of May, because we have to wait until the last risk of frost is over, which is usually not until the middle of May. We'll see what happens. The last 2 years have been a little unusual, and so yeah, I always get that itch to start planting in April when we get a few of those warm days, but then it freezes and then everything dies. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, in this intro welcome section, sometimes there's gardening updates in the spring, summer, early fall time, but yeah, no gardening updates right now. Okay, with that, let's jump into what I am wearing, because it has to do with a finished project. Okay, we are going to start with the item that I'm wearing. This is the Farnham sweater. It is designed by the Knit Pearl Girl. It is my first pattern that I have tried by this designer, and I have to say I'm pretty impressed with the pattern. I thought it was very clear. It gives you instructions on how to pick a size for your body. It gives details as to how to adjust the pattern for your fit. I read through the entire thing. I feel like it was almost 20 pages, maybe? I don't remember. It was definitely a pretty thick packet, and I prefer to work my patterns from paper because I like to mark on them. I do not like having to rely on an electronic device when I am knitting. I prefer like no notifications, no distractions, none of that stuff, and I just don't always like working from a screen. And so I print mine out, and then I usually save them if it is a pattern that I think I might make again. So this is the Farnham sweater, and I knit the first size. The recommended ease is 13.75 inches to 15.75 inches, and the size A gives me about 13 to 14 inches of positive ease. So it is within the recommendations, but on the lower end. And then I did do tapering for the body and tapering for the sleeves, because although I like the boxy fit, I didn't want it to look sloppy, so I still wanted it to look like it was a garment that I made for myself, not a garment that just kind of hangs on my body. And so I feel like this works well for me. The gauge for this pattern is 22 stitches by 32 rows, and it is knit top down. So you do cast on for the back section first, knit to a certain point, put that on waste yarn or tubing, and then you pick up and knit for the front, also flat. And then once that part is done, then you join in the round and finish off the body. I like to knit until my main color runs out and then switch to knitting my sleeves, because I feel like I get a better idea of fit and length of body that I want once this whole top section is done. Otherwise, it's really hard to gauge how the fit is supposed to be like. And so I knit my sleeves. I did knit them a little bit longer than the pattern calls for. I think I added 2 additional stripe repeats, and then I knit my cuff slightly different as well. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I will talk about that in a second. I used Pearl Soho's Good Wool, which is 100% Andean Highland wool, and it comes in 383 yards for 100 grams. And that yarn, I feel like, is so lofty that I can be knit at a fingering weight gauge, sport weight gauge, or even a DK weight gauge, maybe on the lighter end of it. But I have knit with this yarn in multiple gauges with, I think, anywhere from a US 3 because of ribbing, but US 2 or 3, I think, based on ribbing, but up to a US 6, which is a 4mm needle. I don't think I've knit it on a US 7, but maybe I have. I don't remember right now, but I have knit it with a big range, and I feel like it blocks out so beautifully. This is a yarn that is not itchy on me. I have knit with Knit Picks Wool of the Andes, not sport weight, but I've done the worsted and I've done the bulky, I think. And that is the same fiber content, 100% Andean Highland wool. And I felt like that was scratchier than this for some reason. I don't really know. But they both, I feel like, hold up really well and they block out really nicely. But for whatever reason, this one just feels a little softer next to skin for me than that one. To each their own, just an observation that I have made. The colorway I used is Winter Grass, which is this like beigey gray color. Now, in the hank form and caked up and just held on its own, it looks more beigey, but knit up, I feel like it looks more gray beige. So I don't know if it's because of the way it's playing with this mustard yellow color, which is called Wild Mustard. It is a heathered gold color. It seems to make it look more gray. I'm going to come up a little closer and hope that you can see it a little bit better. But I also feel like this is a neutral that seems to shift depending if it's in the sun or shade. So it definitely looks a little more, I guess, a little less gray in the sun, but in the shade, it tends to lean a little more gray. Either way, I really like how this turned out. I think it's just lovely. And the heathering in this yarn just gives it some dimension. And in general, I like heathered yarns, but I feel like these two colors play really well together and is something that is going to be really easy to mix and match with different things. I have it worn with kind of an eggplant purple velvet pants right now, but I feel like this will also look really nice with jeans. So I, again, mentioned that I knit size A, which gives me about 13 inches of positive ease, full bust circumference, but I did taper down on the sides with each stripe repeat, and I don't remember how many I ended up doing. 8? Okay, so if I did 8 decreases, that was 2 decreases per side, so 8 times 4, 32. So I ended up decreasing 32 stitches from the beginning to where I finished off which would be a decrease of like 5-ish inches maybe, somewhere around there. So it ended up being 5 inches less, which still gave me positive ease around the hips, but I just wanted it to be a little more tailored maybe. And then again, I mentioned for the sleeves, I did do a few extra repeats just to make it longer because I like my sleeves longer. I like it when I put my arm out that my sleeve isn't going to ride up. And I also have noticed that with time, like the elbows take up some fabric, and so you end up with like it just kind of naturally riding up, and I didn't want that to happen. I did change all my ribbing to regular 1x1 rib instead of twisted rib, and then I did a sewn bind off, and I feel like that turned out really nice. I really like how it looks. It is still stretchy, but it also holds its shape, and I feel like if I'm going to pull my sleeves up, they still hold really well. Now I have just finished this, so it hasn't gotten like a test run in everyday life yet, but I have to say it is very comfortable, and I so far just really, really like it. I feel like in general, if I finish something, then I'm like, oh, this is my favorite. It's like that honeymoon phase, but we'll see how this goes over the test of time, but I have a feeling it's going to be something I reach for again and again, and because it's so lightweight, this is going to be a perfect spring layering piece for a t-shirt underneath, a tank top underneath. Putting it under a winter coat, at least this morning, didn't feel extra bulky. I think it's also because the fabric is so light and airy that I don't feel like there's a ton of extra fabric bunching up there, and then also because of that deeper armhole, I can layer it really easily. Now another thing that I did do a little different was this neckband, this collar part. I knit this maybe like 3 different times because when I picked up using the stitch count recommended in the pattern, using the needle sizes recommended, which is a US 6 or 4mm, I felt like it was just too floppy. It didn't sit right. And then I took it out, picked up less stitches. Oh, and I had also added extra stripes because I wanted it higher, but it wasn't sitting right. And I think it was also because I was binding off way too loose. I always am nervous about having a too tight bind off, and so I will go up a couple needles to do the bind off. So like, for example, this started out as a US 6 4mm, and then I used a US 8 DPN to do the bind off. Well, it didn't really work in my favor because I did want it to sit up more, but if I have a looser bind off, it's not going to do that. So it was like rolling down. So then I took that out. That's one benefit of having a cast on edge to pick up from. I can just take the whole thing out and not worry about losing stitches. So then I took that out. I went down to a US 5. I can't remember how many less stitches, maybe 10. I think I picked up 10 less stitches, which means it's a little gapey in the front here. Maybe I'll come up a little closer. It's like not as tidy in the front. Because I'm picking up less stitches, there's going to be some gapiness, whereas in the back, I picked up 1-to-1 ratio, and that part is super tidy. It's very tight there, so there's 0 gaping. I'm not sure if it's showing up here. Maybe if I lift it up a little bit. So there is 0 gaping there. This is also picking up in the same direction, right? So they're all vertical, whereas in the front, I'm picking up on the diagonal, so the spacing is going to be a little bit different anyway, but then also picking up less stitches just didn't work in my favor. So I think it worked out just fine. It has been wet blocked. I think over time I just won't notice it anymore. I initially thought maybe I could duplicate stitch over that part if it was still bothering me, but then it would make that area thicker. Anyway, I'm just leaving it. It looks just fine. And then I had to redo it again because I tried the US 8 bind off, but it was way too loose. So then the third time I just bound off using a US 5 double pointed needle, which is the US 5 I used for the neckband. I mean, not a double pointed needle. I knit my neckband on a 16-inch circular, but I like to do my bind off with a needle that's not attached, so I use a double pointed needle. Okay. So then I redid that, but I bound off purlwise. I did that for all of them. I just felt like, I don't know, it's just what I liked, and it fits so nice. I did a wet block of it before finishing everything just to make sure this would stand up the way I wanted it to, and it does. I'm going to tie up my hair so maybe you can see it a little bit better, but this funnel neck was basically a main feature of this pattern, so I just wanted to make sure that I didn't give up on it and I made it the way I wanted it to, and I really like it. It's so comfortable. It doesn't sit tight on my neck at all, but it has structure and it sits up really nice. The original pattern I think holds a fingering weight in a mohair or something like that, which will give it a little more oomph. So it has, even though it's drapey, it still has a little more structure, I feel, because it's not as airy of a fabric. Like, it's airy. Okay, I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this. I feel like the fabric I'm getting is going to be different than one with fingering weight plus mohair or fingering weight plus some other lace weight yarn. And because mine isn't like that, I feel like it can be a little bit trickier, maybe making this stand up because there's a little less structure. So going down in needle size definitely gave me a slightly denser fabric, which makes it have more structure. And in the end, it turned out exactly the way I wanted it to. And so I just love it. I love it so much. There are some decreases to give it this shape, so I followed all the directions for that. I just ended up changing my needle size and doing the bind off purlwise, and I love it. I love it so much. Okay, now that I've gone on and on about that collar, and hopefully I haven't completely confused you, something else that was a big feature for me to knit this pattern is this shaping on the shoulder. The way the stripes line up is very visually appealing. It can be a little bit tricky if you haven't done anything like that before with the short rows, but the pattern, again, is written very clearly, and I didn't have any issues. And if you mess up, just rip it out and start over again. It's totally worth getting it done correctly. So yeah, I love that. I love how in drop shoulder designs, you get a different direction of stripes. And even if you don't do stripes, I feel like the fabric, it still changes direction, right? So I feel like that's really interesting. So on this side, in this front and back portion, you've got horizontal stripes this way. And then in the sleeves, you've got, I don't know, it's not really vertical stripes, but you're going in the different direction. And I just like how that looks. I think that makes it have like another interest in like visual appeal. And yeah, I just really like it. So again, with the sleeve cuffs, I did a knit one, purl one ribbing instead of a twisted rib, and instead of a tubular bind off, I did a sewn bind off. And then I did the same thing in the hem. And I think that turned out really nice. I did not do anything special with jogless joining or anything. This is my beginning of round here on the side. I just tug a little bit of extra, I don't know, give it a little extra tug on each end before weaving it in. And I think it's just fine. Here's the inside. See, all the ends are woven in. I did it as I went, which can be good or bad. It can be good because you don't have a bunch of ends to weave in at the end, but it can be bad because if you need to rip anything out, now you have to undo all the ends that you also wove in. So I don't know. Which way do you prefer to do it? I generally weave my ends in as I go if I'm feeling pretty confident about the project, but if I'm not feeling confident or there's something that kind of hinges on something else and I might have to rip back, then I won't weave them in as I go. Yeah. What do you usually do? Do you wait until everything is blocked, everything is completely finished? Or do you kind of take a chance and weave it in as you go and hope it all works out? So in total, I used 242 grams of the main color Winter Grass and about 57 grams of the contrast color Wild Mustard. This yarn is a really great price point for sweater quantities, and I say that specifically for sweaters because it is something that I can buy in one particular dye lot, and then I don't have to alternate skeins. I don't have to worry about things mismatching. Now, if I ended up purchasing like another one later because I ran out, I might run into a problem with different dye lots. But in general, I haven't had any issues, and just not having to think about that is really nice. And this yarn, already at a pretty friendly price point, will often go on sale. So Purl Soho often has 15% off, 20% or 25% off sales. And so this yarn can be purchased at $11 or around there, 11 US dollars for 100 grams. And so seeing as how I bought 3 of the main color and I bought 1 of the contrast color. So that's 400 grams total that I would have purchased for less than $50. I'm super pleased with it, and I had even lengthened the sleeves. I feel like I probably lengthened the body just a little bit as well. I don't remember. I just knit it until I felt like it was where I wanted it to be. So that is my Farnham sweater by the Knit Purl Girl. Next up, we have my daughter's Metropolitan Pullover. This is a pattern by Tori Yu. I cast this on Halloween, so October 31st of 2024, and I finished it recently. And this is for my tween. I knit the size 1, which is a finished circumference of 36 inches. That gives her plenty of positive ease. The gauge for this pattern is 16 stitches by 21 rounds. The needles recommended are a US 10, which is 6 millimeters for the main fabric, a US 8, which is a 5 millimeter, and a US 6, which is 4 millimeters. And it does recommend using a fingering weight plus a lace weight. But with a gauge of 16 stitches, I feel like you can do a variety. You could do DK plus a lace weight and get a denser fabric, or you could potentially do worsted and kind of see where you go with that. The pattern recommends fingering plus a lace weight, and that is what I did. Here we are. Oh, it's so beautiful. It is like a slightly peachy pink color. The yarns I used are the Yarn Collective Fleurville 4-ply. That's the fingering weight in the colorway Carnation. And this is 100% superwash merino. It is a slightly plumper fingering weight yarn, and I did that on purpose because I didn't want the fabric to be gapey at all. And then the lace weight yarn is a discontinued yarn by Knit Picks. Colorway is Champagne Peach, and the yarn is called Alpaca Bloom, and that comes in 164 yards for 25 grams. So again, that yarn is discontinued. I don't find it to be the easiest yarn to work with because I think it's a nylon core, it stretches, and so as you're pulling, the tension doesn't seem to pull evenly with the fingering weight yarn, and so sometimes it just gets, I don't know, it just gets kind of annoying to work with, and then some areas of the fluff get kind of clumpy. It's like it kind of wants to bunch up on itself while you're knitting. I don't know. Anyway, I wanted to use up what I had, and so I had to really manage my yarn well, because I took apart another project that I just had never gotten very far on, but had used this yarn. So I had some balls of that with it already held together. And then I had another project with a little bit of it that I took apart and wound that up. So I had a lot of little sections. And so I also don't know my totals of how much yarn I used for each one because some were already balled up. And I could do like a percentage and figure out the weight and multiply by the percentage to get the yardage and all of that, but I don't want to. So it's going to be fine. I don't anticipate making another garment with the same yarn combination again, so there's no reason that I need to calculate that yardage. So for this, I did do it a little bit differently. For this top section, it is knit top down. It is a, oh, what does she call it? Contiguous kind of set in sleeve, but not set in sleeve. Let me pull it up so I actually tell you the correct information here. Tori calls it a top-down contiguous construction worked seamlessly in the round to mimic set-in sleeves. Okay, I was pretty close. I was getting there, but she says it a little more eloquently. I tested this pattern last year and I loved mine. And so my daughter liked it too, and I thought, you know what? I think she would look really good in this. And so I started it with a US 9 instead of a US 6. That way I could shorten the yoke depth a little. I was already knitting the smallest size, but I didn't want it to overwhelm her more petite frame. The pattern is written for adult sizes. And so yes, I started with a US 9, which then shortened the yoke depth a little, broadened the top a little because she'll have narrower shoulders. I didn't want it to completely be falling off. The neckline is a more crew neck, but I just didn't want the shaping of the shoulders to be where they weren't supposed to be. And so that brought it in just enough. And then once I got to the body section and the sleeves, I did knit those on a US 10. Now I did do the neckband slightly different as well. I did this holding the merino double. I just felt like that would be more comfortable on her neck. And I did the same on the sleeves. I pretty much ran out of the fluff. I have a teeny bit left. It's less than 5 grams, but I didn't want the sleeves to bother her because they hit right at elbow length and it looks so cute. I didn't do any decreases, but with it rubbing potentially in the elbows, I didn't want it to be scratchy at all. And so I did the merino held double. So there's the beautiful I-cord edging there. And then the neckband is a simple rolled edge. And I did, I think, pick up for the same number as it calls for the size 1, but I did different number of increases. I think I followed the increase repeat for size 3, and then I bound off. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be too tight, but I did still want it to be closer fitting to her neck. So that's how I made it work. And she said it is super comfortable and it's so cute on her. It is full length on her. I can't remember what I blocked it out to. I think it was about 11 inches from the underarm, and there's plenty of space in this yoke section, but the sweater doesn't ride up too high when she lifts her arm. I mean, I'm thinking she'll probably still wear a t-shirt or a camisole or something underneath, but yeah, I'm so pleased with how it came out. I don't have final yardages again because I was using bits of yarn everywhere, and I had quite a few ends to weave in the sleeve section just because of all those little bits and pieces that I was pulling together. But it works out pretty well because the fuzzy yarn has a little more, I want to say, grip to it, and so the ends hopefully will stay put. I feel like if it was all 100% superwash merino, weaving in ends can sometimes be a little more annoying because nothing wants to grip to each other just because of the treatment on the yarn, but the fuzz helps a little bit to keep those ends where they're supposed to be and keep them from poking out as much. But yes, this is done. It's so drapey. She absolutely loves the color. She loves the fit. She's worn it with leggings and that looked really cute. I'm super excited for her to wear this into the spring. This is the Metropolitan Pullover by Tori Yu. The next finished project is also one that I showed last time that was almost finished, and it is also for my tween. It is a pair of socks. And these socks, so they are knit for her, but she told me that I could break them in for her. And I think what happened is I knit them a little bit differently than some of the other socks I've knit her before. So these I knit on US 0s, which are 2mm instead of US 1, which is 2.25mm. And I cast on 64 stitches, and then with this gauge, it's like 9 or 9.5 stitches per inch. I'm not sure exactly. I did measure it, but I think it changes some with wear and just wash and wear. But I also knit them slightly longer because she always gets so sad when she grows out of her socks. I think I knit them to like a US 6.5 women's. I wear US 7 women's or 7.5 depending on the shoe. It fits me too, but it also fits her. But she said it feels a little bit stiffer, and I think that is the fabric that she's reacting to, the density of the fabric, which isn't bad or anything. She didn't say they were bad. She said they felt really soft and super silky, but I think they were just different than some of the other socks I've made her. So I get to wear them and break them in for her, and then she'll have them when she's ready for them. But I absolutely love how they turned out. This yarn is the Darjeeling sock set colorway Just Desserts by Earl Grey Fiber Company, who is no longer dyeing yarn currently. This is a 4-ply yarn, 75/25 superwash merino nylon. It is a light fingering weight yarn, which is why I went down to the US 0 or 2mm needle. It was a pleasant knitting experience, and I really like the fabric density. I feel like this is hard wearing, and I did a slip stitch heel flap turn and gusset, and those numbers I used the I'm So Basic sock pattern by Summer Lee Designs, and that's a free pattern. I always feel like I need to follow something for the heel turn. I know there's a recipe or formula for that, but I just don't want to think about it. And so I usually follow some sort of numbers for that. The heel flap, I usually just knit to 2 inches or 1.5 inches, and I feel like I don't have any issues with picking up on the sides. I have done the garter ridge on the side, but I don't always, and I didn't do it here, and I feel like it's plenty tidy. I have no issues with any gaping, any holes. I think that's also because I'm using the smaller needle size, so it creates a very nice fabric with no gaping at all. And yeah, I love how even the speckles are. This yarn is like a pinky lavender, and the speckles are all different colors. You've got red, pink, blue, yellow, and it's so evenly distributed. I like that it did not heavily pool anywhere. Even with the change in stitch count in the gusset, I feel like it's very even, and between the two socks, it looks super nice. Amount of yarn I used was 59 grams of the main color and about 6 grams of the contrast color. So yeah, lucky me. I get to wear these socks for a little bit until my daughter claims them back. And I bought this yarn on sale in July 2021. And I'm so glad to finally use it. I have plenty of yarn remaining to knit another pair of socks. I might do a 3x1 ribbed sock, because I think then we won't have this like fabric density issue that she's reacting to. So if it's ribbed, it will stretch more, but still fit well over time. So maybe I'll experiment with that and see. The third finished project I have to share with you is one that I tested for Tiff Nealon. This is the Waffle Ridgeline. Let me pull up my information here. It was just released. It's a very shallow triangular shawl. And here is mine. Mine is highlighter pink. I feel like sometimes in the middle of winter, all I want is a big bright burst of color. And this is it. This is using Pearl Soho's Daily Wool. It is 100% superwash wool, not merino, but feels, I would say, as soft as merino. It comes in, I don't think I have a tag here to show you. It comes in 164 yards for 100 grams, so it's closer to an Aran weight than a worsted weight. And I feel like it turned out really nice. I used a US 8, which is a 5mm needle recommended in the pattern. There are 2 waffle textures, and you start on one end, knit to the middle, switch the texture, and knit to the other end. It is completely reversible, which I really like in a scarf or a shawl. And I ended up using a total of, did I write it down? Yes, 197 grams of yarn, so 2 skeins total. And I was within the recommended yardage or the predicted yardage of the pattern. So that worked out really well for me. I feel like the texture looks really nice. I'm gonna hold it up a little closer. What I would say is if you're using a superwash yarn, you're just gonna have to weave the ends in a little more carefully, versus if you use a non-superwash yarn, you can wet splice it so that you don't see any ends at all. I'm trying to see if I can even find mine. Mine would be close to the center. I think it's right here. So you might be able to see a little blip where I wove in my end. But it isn't super noticeable, and when it's wrapped around a neck, you really cannot tell at all. So even though this pattern, this version of the Waffle Ridgeline I tested is the shawl, I would never, I don't think, wear it as a shawl just because of how shallow it is. But I do really like it worn just like a scarf. And I have, here, let's see. Here we go. I think it's so comfy. My tween has claimed it as her own, and I don't blame her. It is very soft next to skin. It is not merino, but it is 100% superwash wool. It feels super soft. I feel like this is a good gift knit yarn because of the washability and the next to skin softness, and it does come in a variety of colors. Hopefully I'll share that here on the screen. And I think it's really nice. This is the Waffle Ridgeline shawl, which is meant for worsted or Aran weight, and then the Waffle Ridgeline scarf is a separate pattern that uses DK weight, but it has a similar construction, and it also has the 2 waffle texture patterns. But I did not test the other one, so I don't know how it compares as far as what's similar or different beyond what I just told you. But yes, I tested the Waffle Ridgeline shawl, which I plan to wear as a scarf, and I think it's very lovely. It's something that's going to roll up pretty small, which makes it handy for traveling and just for wearing all the time without overheating. And yeah, so this is the Waffle Ridgeline by Tiff Nealon. Well, we are on to the works in progress. I am going to show you 3 new works in progress since the last time we chatted. The first one is in this super cute little patchwork project bag that I sewed up several years ago. I believe the squares are finished 2 inches, so they must have started at maybe about 2.5-inch squares. They are all floral and they go together, and I think it's just lovely. This is a drawstring bag. If you are interested in sewing your own, I would just search for drawstring or lined drawstring bag. It doesn't even have to be a project bag, and there's lots of stuff out there for that. So I have housed in here my Mud Punch self-striping yarn. This yarn is dyed by Chantal in Canada. This colorway is called Delicate Clouds. It's an 80%, 20% superwash merino nylon. It comes in 385 yards for 110 grams. It is a plumper yarn base, which I really enjoy wearing, and I find it wears over time really, really well. I have other pairs of socks that have been knit in this yarn for, I think, at least 3 or 4 years, and they hardly have any pilling on them, and they are worn all the time. And when I mean wear all the time, I mean like at least once a week. So I have wound my sock yarn into 2 cakes because that's how I like to knit my socks. Oops, this one's kind of coming out here. Because this is a plumper yarn base, just from experience of knitting with this, I like to use a US 1.5 needle. And a US 1.5 needle, is that 2.5 millimeters? Let's see if I can read this. It's so small. 2.5 millimeter 9-inch needles is what I like to use. I have tulip progress keepers on here. Those are made by Yura of Knit Boop Studio. I thought they looked very springy. I'm not sure if it'll show up here. This one is a peachy tulip. And then this one is a yellow tulip. And yeah, I have cast on. I am knitting them identical. So I wound my yarn in half, weighed both of them, got to the stripe color that I needed it to be at, and then I cast on. And so I am doing a knit to purl to cuff right now, and then between each color change, I do 1 knit round. So I don't wait until I get back to the beginning of the round. I just knit until I get to where the color is changing, and then I stop doing the purling, knit all the way around until I get back to that spot, and then I start doing knit to purl to again. What it does is it gives it a very tidy transition to the next color. You don't see any purl bump, and you don't even see where that knit round is. I do have a tutorial here on YouTube, but I basically just told you what I did. So that's all there is to it. And then I plan on going until maybe 5 stripes. I'm not sure how many stripes there are. 6 colors, I think. Here's what it looks like in the caked up form. So there is like a corally color, then a very light peachy pink, a gray, a light gray, a mint, and then like a darker mint teal color. I believe that's where we're headed. The grays, it was a little trickier to see the difference, but I think that's where we're at. So I may or may not switch to just stockinette after this stripe is done. So just do 1, 2, 3, 4 color stripes and then just start the leg. Or I might do an extra deep cuff and do 6 stripes before I start the leg. Maybe I'll do that. I don't know. I can do whatever I want. So that's where these are at. These socks stay in my purse or my backpack because at this stage of my life, there's a lot of waiting time around my children's activities that I have to drive them to, and it doesn't always make sense to be able to go home in between or go run an errand in between. It just doesn't always work that way, and sometimes I just actually physically have to be there, even if I'm not actively doing anything to do with what they're doing. And so socks are a really great way for me to still be knitting on something I want to be doing and still being present. I can talk while I'm knitting socks, especially if it's just run around stockinette. This ribbing part, it's okay. I can talk then too, but I'm not having to refer to a chart or doing any lace work or anything like that. And so this works really well into my life right now. And I always like having a pair of socks on the needles to have in my purse or backpack for that reason. And they never have any, well, I shouldn't say never. They usually don't have like a deadline to them. And once I finish one pair of socks, I like to just immediately cast on another just so I have that available to knit on. And depending on space, I sometimes will just take one half of the sock out with me instead of the entire pair. But the way I usually knit my socks in tandem is I'll do a little bit of one, do a little bit of the other, and kind of keep going back and forth so they're always playing catch up with each other. Then I also know that my mindset's in the same spot with each. My gauge is going to be more the same with each, versus if I knit all of one sock 1 month maybe, and then I don't start the next one for another month or 2 months later, my gauge might be different because I'm in a different time frame maybe, or if I'm more stressed at one time and not as stressed another time, I don't want my socks to come out different. And so this is how I always knit my socks, and it's working for me, and that's what I like to do. So because I'm using a slightly bigger needle, I cast on 56 stitches. I generally like my socks at about 60 stitches, but that also changes depending on the gauge. So if I'm at a tighter gauge, like 9.5, 64 stitches works really well for me, and that's 9.5 stitches per inch. But if I'm closer to like 8 stitches per inch, I like the 60 stitches. And if I'm going to be at like 7.5 or 7 stitches per inch, I, adjust accordingly. And so depending on the fabric density, I will change my cast on number of stitches, and I usually knit my socks all cuff down. And then also depending on how the yarn feels in hand, I might change my needles. The next project I want to share with you is housed in this Tenny Casey bag. She is such a talented sewist, and I just love this bag. It is a boxed bottom bag with a lot of structure. It has this beautiful vinyl covering in the front with these sparkly, I think they're Minnie Mouses, but they are just so cute. And I love the fabric of this one. It has gold accents. It's pink and red. There's lots of peonies and other flowers on it. And it is a wide open zipper bag, which I talked about last time that I prefer. But I just really like this construction. This takes a lot of work. There's binding involved. There's a loop here. There's a zipper and this vinyl part in the front. And there's a lot of parts to this, and I am glad I was able to purchase it from Tanny. So the socks I have in here are the February Colorwork Cuff Club from Summer Lee Designs. There is a monthly colorwork chart that is sent out at the beginning of each month, and sometimes there's one, sometimes there's two, and sometimes there's a theme to go with it, and I have really enjoyed it. For colorwork, I always like to use 9-inch circulars. In general, I knit my socks on 9-inch circulars anyway, but specifically for colorwork, I really like that because there are no edges. I don't have to worry about floats going around edges. I don't have to think about where I am on a chart where my yarn, or not my yarn, but where my needles would split if I was using double pointed needles or magic loop. And so the circular needles just allow me to keep going round and round. They also prevent any laddering because I don't have any of these, or laddering or floats, or no, laddering or puckers because I have no floats. So are you ready? Here we are, aren't they cute? So here is my February Colorwork Cuff Club, and I'm just doing 2 colors. So Mari of the Colorado Knitter, she had also done a 2-color version, and she showed hers I think a couple of weeks ago, and I had let her know that I was also planning on doing 2 colors, so it was just nice to see somebody else also did just 2-color version. I think the original has 5 colors maybe, and then there's a simpler chart that just has the hearts, and then that's 2 colors. But it was just nice to see somebody else also do the 2-color version. At the time, I told myself I couldn't cast on another one until I cast off something else. And so I did cast off something else, so I cast these on. And the yarn I used is Pearl Soho Fine Print. This yarn I was gifted back in the fall when they were launching this new base. This yarn is a 75/25 superwash wool nylon. It is not merino, but it feels as soft as merino. It is 4-ply, it is a light fingering weight yarn, and it knits up beautifully. I have a pair of socks that I knit for my daughter back in the fall, and she has worn them at least once a week, and they have worn really well. There is a little bit of pilling on it, but no sign of any holes or any yarn wearing out or anything like that. I did knit them on, I think I knit those on a US 1, 2.25 millimeter needle, but I think it could also be knit on a US 0, which is what I'm doing here. So I have cast on here, Old Norwegian cast on using the ribbing in the pattern, and I used a US 0, which is 2 millimeter, and then I switched to a US 2, which is a 2.75 millimeter to do the color work. And I tend to knit my color work really loose because I overcompensate. I'm so terrified of tight floats that I knit my color work super loose. I did go up a needle size because in socks, I really need the fabric to have some stretch to go over my heel. And so the US 2 allows more fabric in that area to stretch, but then I was also mindful that since I was going up to a US 2, I didn't have to make sure my floats were super loose, which is what I usually end up doing, and then it looks sloppy. So here's the inside of my sock. I feel like my floats look very tidy. I didn't catch any of them, even for the longer one in the hearts. I just left them as is because I didn't want it to show through. And I feel like this fabric is nice and stretchy without any puckering or super loose floats, which again, I usually end up with super loose floats because I'll knit it extra loose, and I didn't do that this time. So I love how they turned out. I think it's so cute. I did have to modify the bottom chart a little bit just based on how the color management, not color management, the color assignment was. And since I was just doing 2 colors, I just kind of switched it up a little. So I wrote out the whole chart in my project notebook and then colored it in as I was going to do it so I wouldn't get confused. So again, the yarn I'm using is Pearl Soho Fine Print. It does come wound up like a peanut, but I like to work from cakes, so I wound it again. The red is Candy Apple, and the peach is something apricot. Pink apricot, maybe? If I'm wrong, I'll correct myself on the screen. The yarns are really pretty. They are, I wouldn't say they're tonal, but they have a slight watercolor effect to them because there's these white spots that don't have dye on them. So they can certainly be used as tonal, but there's a little bit of dimension just because of how that light part is in there. So maybe closer to semi-solid, but I wouldn't call it tonal because it isn't like it has other shades of like the red. It doesn't have like purpley reds or pinky reds or something like that. There's just areas that have less dye. I don't know if that'll show up here on the screen or if it's too close, but there are areas that just have more white. It is more visible on the darker colors than the lighter colors, but it is still there, and it gives still enough contrast in my socks for the color work to look really nice. And yeah, I am going to start the heel flap on these. I had debated whether or not to use red for the heel flap, but I don't know. I think I might just continue in this peachy color, and then I can decide if I want the heel turn to be red. I think that could be cute. Just have the heel turn part be red on the bottom, and then maybe the toe in red. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see if I decide I want to do that. But I don't know. The heel flap, I'm still debating. Do I want it red? Do I want it the peachy pink? I'll decide later. I am knitting those socks for myself. I cast on for the adult medium, and I look forward to finishing them whenever I finish them. Okay, I thought I had a third work in progress to share with you, but I don't. I think that is all I have to share with you today as far as knitting goes. So on to eats and reads. As far as eating goes, I wanted to share with you something that is so simple and so good. I will have a picture here on the screen so you can see that. It is a grilled cheese sandwich, okay? Grilled cheese. And the cheese I use is Tillamook's cheddar cheese. That's what we like in our house. And then the butter is the Kerrygold butter, which is so good. And then once that is all done, I put on honey and the Japanese barbecue sauce. That's the hot and spicy one. It is so good. If you like sweet, salty, spicy all together, really, really good. So I had that for lunch one day, and I had to share. So hopefully the picture is here on the screen. I have read 2 novellas recently. I really like to read novellas in between long series sometimes, or maybe I just have a lot of 500-page books going on and I just want something that's short and sweet and closes up at the end and there's no cliffhanger. One of these books I did read earlier but forgot to talk about last time, so I'm just going to talk about 2 novellas today. I will have the photo of the cover here on the screen just for visual, and yeah, let's get started. The first one I want to talk about is called Unteathered Sky by Fonda Lee. It was published in April of 2023. It comes in 150 pages. It's classified as adult science fiction high fantasy. We're immersed in a kingdom where there are these human-eating monsters, and they are a problem. They are hunted by rocs, R-O-C-S, which are a mythical bird of prey that basically resemble this huge falcon. The themes within this story include grief, responsibility, internal struggles, relationships between humans and animals, and loyalty. And we have this main character who becomes a trainer, and we go through her relationship with her family, with fellow trainers, with her bird, which I guess I shouldn't really say her bird, but with the bird that she is training. And if you read the book, you'll understand maybe what I mean by that possessive or not possessive relationship. It had a bittersweet ending, but not a cliffhanger, and I felt like I had some resolution at the end, and it's pretty amazing how much world building and character development someone can create within that 150 pages, especially if I've been reading much longer books, which have areas that might drag, and I think, why is this in here? But with a shorter book, you have just less space to be able to put all of that in there. And yeah, I think it was a good read. I did enjoy it. It was a little violent, but it tied into the story, so there was reason for it. So that is Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. The next novella I'd like to share with you is Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. This was published in 2023, 116 pages. It is classified as adult fantasy fiction. It's adventurous, dark, emotional, it's fast-paced. It is a fairy tale with a kind-hearted toad / human, kind of, and that toad human is our heroine. There is kind of a knight, and there is someone trapped in a tower for hundreds of years, and that is for a reason. I enjoyed the twisted tale of this story and how it is told. I feel like it's told in simple words, but the themes are more complicated than that, and it was definitely dark. When I finished it at night, I thought, I'm going to have really strange dreams tonight. I feel like some of the descriptions were very vivid, but didn't necessarily take a ton of words. So it didn't take like a paragraph to explain something, but boom, you're hit with like 3 sentences, and I cannot get rid of that imagery. Like, I see it in my head still. And that is really good writing. So Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. Okay, I have a fun food for thought today. I just decided we're gonna have some fun. And this is something that I have done in the past. So if you have been here for that one, then you're gonna hear this again. I don't even remember when it was. It could have been years ago. And maybe the answer you have will be different from then and now anyway. So the question I have for you is, if you could be a colorway, what colorway would you be? And I mean like your personality, or maybe it would be your mood just right now, because I know my mood changes all over the place, but a colorway. So you can either name the colors that are in your colorway, or name the colorway, or do both. So you could just have it be one word. It could be a long sentence, I suppose, if you wanted, and then it's up to you if you want to describe your color. And if you're like really into it and want to talk about your fiber content, go for it. You can be as creative as you want. I think it's just like a fun little creative challenge. I don't know. I don't know what my colorway would be right now in this given moment. Jewel tones, neutrals with pops of color. I don't know. Maybe that's what I'm feeling right now. Maybe I would be a neutral with pops of color. I'll have to think about that one. If you think of something fun for yourself, feel free to drop that in the comments below. It's just something fun to do. Zero obligation to do it. You can even just think about it if you want as a fun exercise. And maybe you're a yarn dyer and that's just like what you think about all the time. I don't know. With that, cheers to being creative. I hope you are doing well, taking good care of yourselves, your loved ones, and your neighbors, and I will talk to you next time.